In today's episode of the Health Collective podcast, we are talking with Charlie Johnson, and I'm super excited about today's episode. Now, Charlie Johnson has been voted one of the top 3 coaches in the world by Forbes magazine. He has over 500,000 followers on Instagram, and he is a well-known sensation across the globe. So we are super excited to have him here today. More importantly, he's also one of my personal mentors as well. Now, in today's episode, we are talking about all the fundamentals of fat loss, body health, and body transformation. What does it take to not just lose fat, to maintain it consistently for the rest of your life? We look at the key myths around fat loss. What do you actually not need to do to achieve a perfectly lean and toned physique? We look at the fundamentals of fat loss, the keys of what you need to do on a daily basis to maintain a physique long term. And we also look, most importantly, at motivation, consistency, and persistency. Make sure you listen in. It's a really, really key episode. I absolutely loved filming this with Charlie. And most importantly, if you are a woman over 40 going through menopausal changes, hormonal changes, and seeing weight pile on around the belly and really just not enjoying the body that you're in and wishing that you could change, make sure you reach out to the health and fitness coach. You can do that by heading to our website, thehealthandfitnesscoach.com. You can do that by emailing us at Rita, R-I-T-A, at thehealthandfitnesscoach.co.uk, or you can follow us on socials. Make sure you head to Instagram, which is at the.health.and.fitness.coach, and make sure you also subscribe to this YouTube channel so that you can get more podcasts just like this before they air anywhere else. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the Health Collective podcast. And I am super excited to have our guest with us today. So I am talking today with Charlie Johnson, and a lot of you might know him off of Instagram, off of Facebook. He is quite a feature on our social media these days in the world of health and fitness. And I'm also very proud to call him one of my business mentors, and he's helping me in terms of helping women just like you in their bodies, minds, and souls improve. And Charlie, well, he never started his life in the fitness world. Actually, he had quite an opposite beginning that we're going to be discussing. But today, he is one of the largest UK-bred personal trainer, online fitness coaches, helping hundreds of thousands of men and women alike thread the fat, lean down, and really find bodies that they truly love to be in. So first of all, Charlie, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be with us today.
Pleasure, and thank you for the very glamorous introduction. I was joking before the podcast began that for the first time in like 5 years, I've had a clean shave to try and look younger. I'm actually trying to age down now rather than age up. I've got that awkward point in life.
I think we all get to that stage where we flip the tide, and there's in social media, the number of filters that I now see, and I think, oh, what's hiding behind that? So a clean shave I just like the fact that you dressed up for us. So thank you.
Thank you.
So Charlie, for those who don't know you, could you give us a little bit of a background of what you do and where you came from? What led you to running a sort of worldwide fitness empire, as it were?
So to give like a 60 to 90 second synopsis. So I'm originally from Surrey. I was from a little small market town outside of Guildford. I was overweight as an early teenager, and that was one of the things that really was like a skeleton in the closet for me. And I was probably overweight until I was like, I qualified as PT at 19, did all the course, all the stuff. But the reality is what they teach you in like PT school is terrible, and it's not actually applicable in terms of actually helping people get results. So just because someone's qualified to do something doesn't mean they're actually good to do it, for anyone listening. So with that, I then decided after PTing for 6 months, I didn't really like it. Went into ski season for 4 months. Random fact, I'm a qualified ski instructor. came back and I was like, oh, I don't really want to do PT. That's not really for me. I went into the property industry. So for my sins, I went and became a letting agent with a small independent company that finally got bought out by the Leaders Roman Property Group. So I ended up working for a big corporate company. Around 22, I was managing a pretty big branch, way too early. Looking back at it now, it's retarded. From there, I really flourished in that job till 25, 26. My passion for fitness came back. I then got myself in great shape finally. I did a photo shoot, and the secret for that, Rita, was this. I hired a coach. And this literally changed my life, because I was like, I don't want to do that forever, right? And I was like, holy shit. I was like, I've done this. Like, this actually worked. And then it clicked in my head. I was like, this is literally the shortcut to life. I was like, okay, I'm just going to go find someone who can teach me what I need to know, do it, and I get the result. Like, and that literally changed my life. And something for everyone to think about is thinking about who, not how. So whatever problem you have in life, who's the person who can solve it, not how can you solve it? Because they can literally give you the answer rather than you spending 3 years trying to work it out. And the reality is, too many people don't understand the opportunity cost of the time they lose trying to figure it out, where someone can just give you the solution. One of my favorite sayings from one of my previous business mentors is success loves speed. And that's one thing. So post photo shoot, I started to post on social media. One thing led to another. I started to get some notoriety because I was sharing a lot of results, sharing what I was doing, just documenting my own journey. Got to the point where I was making more money from my online training versus my proper estate agency job. Now, I know one of the things we were going to talk about in this is people not having time and people like I work with from business mentoring, like, oh, I don't have time to do it. At the point of, I think, 2017, I was competing in bodybuilding shows, running an estate agents on a 6-figure salary, and also running an online business that's probably bigger than most people's now. I was doing all three, and it's managing to fit it in somehow. And the reality is, for anyone listening to this, is don't set limited beliefs to what you can do. Just because people say you can't do something, you can't have it all, you can. You just need to believe it. And long story short, I left my full-time job, which is another cool story we can go into. Grew our fitness business, then featured in Forbes, Men's Health, Muscle and Fitness, loads of other stuff. Moved to Dubai 18 months ago, and now have the wonderful opportunity to help amazing people like Rita have impact all over the world and change people's lives, because I'm a product of coaching and I want to help other people reap the rewards of the shortcut that coaching gives them in their life.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing some of that. And as you were talking, there was a few things that really jumped out. And the one that I really want to start with is, you said as a kid, you were overweight, and probably like a lot of people believed kids are cruel. I have 3 of them. They're cruel. They say it as it is. Do you feel that as a child, with this stigma of being overweight, did it have an effect on your identity, on your mental and emotional view of yourself? How did it affect your relationship with who you thought you were? And has that relationship changed over the years?
Yeah, 100%. So we're back. So 100%. So one of the things that most people don't realize about me is I'm actually very introverted naturally. And when I was a child, I was incredibly shy and lacking confidence. That when I talked to people I didn't know, I didn't want to go on school trips. I didn't want to do any of that stuff. And I even put something on social media recently that only probably until 3 years ago, when I started to get a lot of success, I suddenly started to believe in myself. And as soon as I started to believe in myself, everything became easy. And the way I explain this to people is, it's like a flywheel. It's hard to get momentum in life and to get things going. But once you get that wheel to turn, it goes faster and faster, and it becomes easier and easier. Because the biggest thing for anyone listening to this right now is, you're the person holding you back. The person holding you back right now is the person looking you back in the mirror, because you don't believe you can have financial wealth, you can have a great family, and you can have a great body and a great relationship. And if you don't believe that's possible, it's never going to happen. Now, the reality is, if you're open-minded enough to believe that can happen, then you can do it. And I remember someone saying to me maybe 5 years ago, you couldn't be a millionaire, have abs, and do all this other stuff. And I was like, well, I don't really understand why not, because I'm probably still going to work out anyway. So if I just work out what will I eat and then do the work I'm supposed to do, then why not? And the reality is everyone has the same amount of time, which is actually a fair level playing field. Is what you decide to do with your time that decides the course of your life. And an important thing for anyone to think about is literally every action you do is either taking you towards what you want or away from you what you want. There's no like middle ground. Like literally, if you go to the cinema and you sit there and you watch a film or you watch Netflix for 4 hours a day, that's taking you away from what you want, because if you're looking for financial wealth, it's not going to help you make money. If you want to be in great shape, it's not going to help you get in shape. If you want to have better relationships, watching Netflix isn't going to improve that. Like, start to think more about what you're actually doing every day, I think is a huge thing, because a lot of people run on autopilot. But for me, the big thing is getting that, when I started to get self-belief. And when the self-belief came, I then almost found it my mission to help other people do that. And I say that's my biggest gift, is giving people the belief that they can do what they don't think they can do.
Belief is such a huge word for a lot of people listening. I think it affects men and women, don't get me wrong, but I think as females especially, self-belief can often get beaten down by this idea that we have to be everything to everyone. We have to be mom, and we have to be a good wife and a good business owner, and all of these different labels. And actually the label of just what do I want, who do I want to be, can get a little bit lost. And you said that obviously you went from being overweight as a kid, and I can relate, I was 70 pounds overweight, so I get that. And then you went to doing body competitions and, you know, in exceptionally good shape. So for those people listening who look at Instagram and look at people like you and say, well, he's got a team of people doing that for him, or he's, you know, jacked up on whatever it might be, whatever gear. He spends, you know, 10 hours a day in the gym to look like that. That isn't realistic for me, which is a lot of judgment that people make when they see what I call Insta famous influencers. What would you say to that? What does it take for you to maintain that physique?
This is actually really good, because a lot less than you think. If I could work out, when I probably scale things back a bit, I reckon I could work out 3 hours a week and maintain my physique. I do less now than I did 4 or 5 years ago, because this is the most important thing to understand. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. So I can get more out of doing less. So I actually get better results by doing less. I even taking more time off. I probably get better results if I train less, but I like it. So it's like, it makes me feel good because it's more of a mental escape side of things. And this is a reality. And for anyone listening to this, this is going to hit home. If you're, say, for example, you're 45 right now and you're listening to this, think back to maybe when you were 25. Were you in better shape when you were 25? Probably. So that's 20 years ago. Now, for example, if you've been working out 3 hours a week, okay, cool. And you've been doing that for the last 20 years and going backwards. If we say very pessimistically, your time is worth, say, let's be really pessimistic. Say you earn $100 an hour. So you're losing $300 a week for the last 20 years to look worse. Now that's what, $1,200 a month. That's 12,000. What's that? $1,200 a month. That's what, 12,030. So what, 14,200 a year. So that's 142. It's 200 and about $284,000 you've lost over the last 20 years to look worse, to give some context, plus the time you've lost. So the reality is, you not knowing what you're doing and maximizing what you're doing is going to literally waste your time and lose your money. So the most important thing that I always have thought is, I want the maximum return on everything I do. So I go to the person I can learn the most from. So I even have people coach me now who are the best in the world, because even if I pick up small things, there's something called the compound effect. The 1 or 2 things you learn every week, month, you have the next 30, 40 years you live. They're going to stack up for you for the rest of time. Now, the opportunity cost in you not doing that is huge. And that's why everyone listening to this, you should always think about constantly learning. And a corny saying from a business point of view is, the more you learn, the more you earn. And you need to have an infinite budget investing in yourself to learn, and you've got unlimited earning potential. And it's the same when it comes to your health and your fitness, because You don't know what you don't know. And if you're in a position like, oh yeah, I feel okay. Well, you feel okay because you don't know what it feels like to feel great. And if you go from feeling great and then you feel a bit shitty, you're like, I never ever want to feel like this again. And that's what healthy and super fit people feel like. And you just haven't been in that position yet. Does that sound relatable to you, Rita?
Absolutely. You know, as you say, find people that can show you how to do it in the most efficient way possible. I always say to my clients, success leaves clues. Go and find the clues and follow them. If you want to make money, find people who are millionaires, billionaires, and look at what they did. Don't get a financial advisor who earns less than you to advise you what to do with your money.
That literally is like that's like the epitome of the most stupid thing I hear people say.
Absolutely. And it's the same in your body. Go and find not someone who hasn't necessarily done your journey. You know, what I'm seeing, especially with COVID, is, you know, I have very good relationships with a lot of gyms, and I'm seeing these 18-year-old lads with cereal box certificates that they got offline because everything was shut for 3 years. Don't listen to people that haven't been there, done it, and worked out the best way, especially for you. So I completely relate. And one of the things that you said is the compound effect. And I would urge anyone who isn't quite aware to go and play a game of golf, 18 holes, bet 10 pence on the first one and double it every hole and see what it comes to by the end. Just give you a very, very easy way of understanding the compound effect. But on that note, the compound effect requires consistency. Doesn't work if you do it for 1 or 2 weeks and stop. And consistency, for a lot of the people listening, is the downfall. The repetitive nature of consistently doing things over and over again. And most people will call it plateauing, self-sabotaging, lack of willpower, lack of motivation. So how do you approach consistency in your life, and how might you give guidance to those who are struggling with that?
Firstly, this is the most important thing anyone can have in life. And it's the biggest superpower that when you get this, you're undefeatable. And that's the ability to do the things you have to do when you really don't want to do them. To give an example, last week I had the privilege of the ability to go to the gym and train. And I literally couldn't have thought of anything least I wanted to go and do train legs. I was like, fuck this, I'm not going, I don't want to go, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. And I just went there, put my headphones on, hated it, and I just did it. Now, the reality is when you have the ability to do the things you don't want to do, but you can do them like you love them, which is like Mike Tyson saying, that's when you can do anything. Because like, if you then start doing stuff you actually like, or it's not that bad, like, oh, this is pretty easy. And you mentioned to me in terms of like bodybuilding competition, stuff like that, quite statistically, one of the things I quite like is like, how far can you physically push yourself to the edge, like just living a life? Because when you come back to anywhere near normal, it's so easy. And that's what we don't understand, that our lives are so easy in reality of like the society we live in versus like hundreds of years ago when we were farming fields. Like our life isn't that challenging really. Now, the most important thing for people to be successful is 2 things. One is the environment around you. So the people you talk to, the information on social media you absorb, potentially where you live, the gyms you go to, the people you hang around with, because your thoughts aren't really your own thoughts. You're the interpretation of what you see and what you hear. Secondly is structure and routine. So you can set yourself up to fail or succeed depending on your daily habits. So the best book on this, I'm actually rereading again at the moment, it's called Atomic Habits. It's probably the best book. Every single person should probably read this once a year, because you will only succeed to the level of your habits and systems. So if you set yourself up where you're in a good routine every day, you will probably be successful if you do it consistently. Like, it's impossible. I've never seen anyone who doesn't do what they're supposed to do consistently. They'll get there. In particular, from fitness point of view, it is physically impossible. If someone's in a calorie deficit for a sustained period of time, you won't lose weight. Like, it is impossible. Business is slightly different because there's more external factors, things like COVID could happen or whatever. But like, if you're talking about your health and well-being, that is relatively straightforward to some interpretation. Now, where it's not straightforward is human psychology and people not being able to hack the process. Now, when it comes to that, that's not, that's a level of lack of self-awareness, of not understanding maybe why you feel a certain way through a process. And as a coach, it's our duty to make you understand that it's actually a good thing that maybe you feel hungry, because that's your body actually using and losing body fat. So if someone client says to me, I'm really hungry, I'm like, great, you're gonna look good tomorrow. And like, even for me, when I was like competing, respectfully, the worst I felt, the better I looked the next day. So like, when I started to understand that, I was like, I feel really bad. I was like, I'm gonna look really good tomorrow. I'm just gonna go to bed. Just don't eat anything. And that's where you need to get your head into the game of understanding that fitness isn't a finite game. You don't get fit and stop and then you've won fitness. It never stops. Fitness and health and well-being ends when you die. So when you have that mentality that the game of fitness and business is an infinite game where you have to stay in the game to win, you start to make the better decisions for yourself long term.
I completely relate with everything you said. And, you know, one of the biggest points that I always hit home with people is there's more problems. I said, well, the only people in life that don't have problems are dead, right? Fitness and body doesn't stop. If you haven't got problems, you're dead. All you want is to have better quality problems. The more money you make, the more better quality problems. About your body, same thing.
Same, and the bigger your business gets, the more problems you have. And this is what people don't understand, is that like they want a life where you have no problems. Is like, if you have a life you have no problems, you probably have a life that's not worth living, because you probably just live under your duvet, because you're always going to have shit that goes wrong. And one thing that's important for people to understand is that like your stress tolerance will start to increase in your ability of what you can handle and absorb. And that's an important thing for everyone to be able to do. And random, a bit of a nerd with stats. People from Eastern Europe, for example, has statistically been proven genetically that people from places like Poland and like Yugoslavia have much higher stress tolerances, because genetically those countries have always basically been at war constantly. So the people are used to being really stressed with things going on. Now, unless you currently live in like Ukraine, probably no one's in that situation. So the reality of your level of stress is probably not that high compared to like your house is going to get blown up. So like context of problems is always an important thing for people to understand. And when I get stressed with things, I try and articulate that, like, I'm getting pissed off because of X, Y, Z. Is like, the reality is it's not that big a problem.
Absolutely. And I thought it was really interesting what you said. You know, even last week, I had to go to the gym. I like the reframing that you did with yourself. You know, I had the privilege, but a lot of us have that. And there seems to be this belief amongst people listening to this, but in general, that if you get to a certain level of fitness, it's easy. Avoiding the cake stand or doing this is easy. Getting up at 5 a.m. to go for a, you know, low intensity, steady state jog is easy. Going to the gym and lifting is easy. There seems to be this mentality that suddenly something will happen, a switch will flip. And you sort of brought it into the context of, for want of a better word, discipline. Because discipline, regardless of where you are in your life, is about doing the things that bring you what you want most rather than what you want now. Because it's very easy to just hide under a duvet with Netflix and a tub of Ben and Jerry's and while away a day. So with that in mind, the why, the what you want most, I'd love to find out what your why is. What is it that you want most that drives you to maintain the discipline in your life?
That's a very good question. So, and the most important thing for people to understand, I think, is what motivates you, because when you understand that, you can lean into that. For me, it's to do what I do now, I sacrifice a lot to get to the position I am. And I actually had this conversation with someone else earlier today, and I was like, I've come so far, but I need to finish the job and do what I've set out to do. And one of the jobs I've set out to do is like, I want to help and impact loads of people, because I actually felt that 26, 27 is when I started to live life and I started to get in shape and I started to believe in myself, and I suddenly started to live because I wasn't scared anymore of showing who I wanted to be. And so many people live in these introverted timid shells of the person they really want to show who they are. And that's why I feel it's my ability to push people to come out of that, because you don't know what you don't know. It's probably my favorite saying. And the same as people don't know how great it feels to feel healthy, people don't know how great it is to have financial freedom to go live wherever they want. And people might be, oh, well, that's great for you. It's like, yeah, but I did it. Like 5-6 years ago, I used to work in a corporate 9-to-5 job. I worked like 6 days a week, like 70 hours a week, and commuted an hour each way on the M25. Anyone in the UK knows the M25 is like a rush hour. Like I've been there, I lived there basically. But you can control your reality, and the life you live right now is the compounding effect of the choices you've made. Your life in 5 years will be the compounding effect of the choices you make. And the most important thing is trying to delay gratification. So for me, it sounds weird, but I'm in a season of my life where I'm trying to suffer more now so I can suffer less later. I pay the price today, so I can pay any price later on. And the reality is, for people listening to this, if you're 45, 50, what you do right now is going to make a massive difference when you're 65. Financially, health-wise, because if we look at health longevity, if you've got kids and you want to see your grandkids, number one cause of death is old age, which is essentially you get weak, you fall over, you break your hip, you go in hospital, you die of a complication. That can be prevented. Now, that's within your own conscious choices right now of what you do. To give a good story, Rita, I remember I was on a plane, I can't remember flying, but I remember a guy saying to me, he was an interesting guy. He worked building like super yachts. So I was like, I'm definitely going to talk to you. You were interesting. And he's like, I really want to get fit in shape, but I just can't be asked. I can't get motivated. And I was like, okay. And he was like, tell me one thing that'll motivate me. And I was like, okay, cool. I knew he had daughters because it came up conversation. I was like, would you like to still be alive at your daughter's wedding? He's like, you bastard. And I was like, because that's what you need. People need something that's the driving force. And that's going to be people's partners. That's going to be your kids. That's going to be the legacy you probably leave behind. And when you start to understand what that's going to be the driving force for you. And for me, currently, it's just trying to have an impact to help other people and leave my own legacy in some respects, if that makes sense.
Completely makes sense. And I think for a lot of people, impact is quite a significant word, especially if those listening have got kids. You want to make an impact and leave a legacy for those children, and defining that why. And also, I like the way that you phrase it, that this is my why at the moment, that the why can change. It doesn't have to be set in stone. And as the seasons of life change, so does the desire and the motivation. There was something that you mentioned as we were chatting about what influences people. And you said the two biggest things are sort of the environment and the relationships around them. And I want to maybe talk about something which, for a lot of people listening, is probably quite an uncomfortable subject. And that's their relationships, their marriage, the state of the marriage, and the impact it's having on them. I spoke to a woman just yesterday who hadn't had sex in 10 years. They sleep in separate bedrooms. She doesn't feel desirable, doesn't feel sexy. And this is really common for a lot of women. We just don't want to talk about it because it's not a nice thing to have to discuss. So when you say relationships have such an impact, if someone's in this catch-22 where their relationship is maybe stagnant, I call it sort of, it's lost the playfulness. It's stagnant because of how they feel in their body, but that stagnation is also causing almost self-destructive natures in their body. Is there any guidance that you could talk about where it comes to that? Because that's a very different relationship to, I've been with him for 6 months, it'll probably not last. What would you say when a relationship has gone on for a very long time, there's longevity, there's kids involved, but the relationship is maybe not serving that person?
I think that is having, from a male point of view, and obviously I'm a man, so I can talk about this, men are terrible about talking about these things. So like the likelihood of them starting this conversation is probably slim to none. So like, and I can see nodding and agreeing. So the reality is this is probably, if women listen to this, is going to have to come from your side. to have this conversation. And it's probably something that they want to talk about as well, but they don't feel comfortable about how to approach it because men aren't good with those things. And the reality is, you might be listening to this and thinking, oh, I don't want to have a conversation. They're going to bite my head off. Like, the reality is they've probably been wanting to have this, but have felt insecure to ask, or because not all men have massive egos, let's be honest. So like, they don't want to go down that route, having those type of conversations. They don't talk about emotional shit. Like, I don't like talking about that stuff. And that's the reality, is that you need to drive that forwards. And the way, the tonality of that conversation leads it, rather than having in like an aggressive tone, is an important thing. And one thing I would say is a good thing to do, and I think that's something I've definitely noticed, is change the environment of where you have that conversation. So for example, if you can have a break, you go away for the weekend somewhere else outside your house, outside of your normal environment. You've got no kids, none of that dog, cat, any of that stuff around. That's an easier environment for you to have these type of conversations. And everything in life is feedback, like communication. And if you don't communicate about it, nothing's going to happen. But one thing I would say is that, for example, for women listening to this, if you get yourself in better shape, the rest of that relationship is going to improve, because your partner will get more attracted to you. It's just human nature. And that's going to be that flywheel, like I mentioned earlier. You'll be like, oh, I like this. So then, like, positive comments, positive feedback loop, you're going to want to try harder and do better. And if you get to the point where you've gone to the other inspection, they don't seem like they give a shit, guess what? You're probably not going to give a shit about your appearance either. And you're probably going to start to go backwards. You'll feel worse. Your habits will get worse. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that you probably get less healthy, in worse shape, your partner's less attracted to you. And you then suddenly realize 5 years later, like, what's happened to me? And that could have all been prevented. Or if you're in that situation right now, you have the ability to change that. It's just a conversation.
I love that you obviously, made the point that when you feel better in your body, everything else starts to move a little bit easier. And when it comes to the sort of the fitness world, the health world in general, I've seen, just like you, that a lot of it is human psychology, and it's mainly, choices that we make are based on beliefs that we have. And most of the beliefs that we have are complete BS about ourselves, about how hard things should or shouldn't be. So what are some of the myths that you've heard people come up with when it comes to why they can't lose weight, or why they can't ever have abs, as you said? What are some of the more prevalent myths that you've heard in your time in the industry?
Okay, I'm going to say this is really not going to be a popular thing to say, but I remember, and this is repeating what my parents told me. I just remember the saying, is like, there was no fat people in Auschwitz. When people talk about having a slow metabolism, it's like, you don't have a fucking slow metabolism, you just eat too much. Like, unless you actually go to a doctor and like you've got a severely underactive thyroid, which is highly unlikely for most people, then that's not the issue. The two biggest things and this is why fitness relatively is easy. You control what you eat, you control how much you move every day. There is not really a huge amount of external factors outside of that. So that would be one thing, is people saying they have a slow metabolism. Your metabolism was also dynamic. It's not static. So like, you can improve your metabolism from weight training, losing body fat, all these different things. Same thing as some people say about my favorite one, ketogenic diet. I don't know if you agree with this. It is possibly the most retarded thing you could do for fat loss. And I'm just going to explain why. So people like the whole no carbs before marbs thing, if anyone's from the UK and they into that stuff, people think that they stop eating carbohydrates for a few days, their weight suddenly drops. Okay, cool. Your weight technically drops, correct. But what actually happens? You're depleting your body of glycogen. Your glycogen also holds water, so it means you're dropping water. So guess what? Yeah, you are lighter. Guess what? You're not burning fat. And scientifically, if you're in a state of ketosis, which normally takes like 7 to 10 days where you don't eat any carbohydrates, which for anyone listening to this, if you eat no carbs for 3 days, you're not in ketosis. The reality is that when you're in a ketosis, which is a state where your body uses fat as the primary source of fuel, guess what? You will burn more fat for energy, but you're only consuming fat for calories. So what do you think your body's going to be burning? Like, it has to use the calories you're eating because you're eating more fat. So the actual secret to fat loss is using a balanced macronutrient diet of protein, carbohydrates, and fats in roughly the right amounts, which puts you in a calorie deficit you can stick to. And the number one rule for anything is something you said earlier, is consistency. So adherence. And with that, I'd probably say the third biggest mistake people make is, and I get caught up in this as well, is we want everything now. So people want to throw the kitchen sink into their body straight away in terms of getting results to drop body fat. So they start a program with Rita and me tomorrow, and they're like, oh, I want to do no carbs. I want to work out 4 times a day. I want to do Pilates. I want to stretch in the morning. I want to do meditate. And I want to do ice bath. I want to do all this one day. And the reality is you want to do the least to get the most amount of results. So you want to do as little exercise as possible to burn the most fat. You want to eat the most amount of calories possible to burn the most amount of fat. Because what's going to happen when you go through a weight loss journey is that your calories are going to have to come down as you get leaner, and your output in terms of how many calories you burn are going to have to go up, because there's something called body set point theory, where your body wants to keep you in homeostasis where it's used to. So as your fat cells shrink, basically alters the release of your fat storage hormones, mainly leptin and ghrelin. So as these alter, it's basically trying to trick you in terms of thinking like you need to eat more, because it's trying to get your body weight back up, which is why I said earlier, it's like when people say, I said they feel hungry, I'm like, that's good. That means you're losing fat. So when you start to understand some of these processes, it helps. But those would probably be the biggest things I think are misconceptions. And probably the last one I think is a big one. There's quite a few, is you can't eat carbs in the evening or like after 6 p.m. It makes no difference what time you eat carbohydrates. Like what makes a difference is your overall calorie intake for the day and for the week. But why I say for the week is that, like, I did this, and I distinctly remember being like 21, 22 when I was still fat. Like I semi-starved myself Monday to Friday. Saturday, Sunday, I'd eat like Domino's. I'd go out all the time, do whatever. And then I'd barely make any progress because I was like, you're like robbing Peter to pay Paul with calories. And that's a vicious cycle where people get into that Monday cycle of like, I feel crap again, so I'm going to starve myself for a few days. And you don't have to be in that type of loop, because when you get your body to work correctly, you can literally have your cake and eat it and still lose weight. But you just need to understand how and have some guidance and structure to do that.
Completely. I completely agree with everything you said. Keto is one of the worst things that has ever come out of life, because someone will say to me, well, isn't keto good? Carbs make you fat. Carbs are a natural product that the majority of the world's animals eat. You don't see, little blue tits eating grains and wandering around with obesity problems. Carbs don't make you fat, but eating a lot of overcompensating on the dominoes and getting into that spiral of good and bad, and then the guilt that then comes with it does. So, I completely agree with those myths.
An easy quick rule of thumb I'd say for anyone is try to avoid really high carb, high fat meals together. So these generally tend to be junk food. So like, for example, I'm a fan of the cheesecake at Cheesecake Factory, right? That's very high in fat and very high in carbohydrates. So that is an example of something that if you want to lose fat, you don't want to eat. But if you wanted to eat, even as an example, like sorbet ice cream is very high in carbohydrates. There's no fat at all in it. So like literally after training, you could have that and your body would churn through that really quickly. Wouldn't cause much of an issue. It's just that combination of high carb, high fat you really want to avoid, which is like most takeaway foods, fried foods, creamy stuff like pizza.
Absolutely. People forget that actually your muscles need carbs just as much as they need protein to develop. But just as you say, sort of avoid that combo and then you're going to be in a really good place. So, you've given us so many great pieces of advice and tips and guidance. And what I'd love to finish up on is hindsight is a wonderful thing. And for you, I know you shaved so that you could have the little baby face today, but you're still very youthful. You've got a lot of life to live. And there are a lot of people listening to this that maybe feel that they're losing time, that time is slipping by and they don't know what to do or how to change. You said as your younger self, you were a very different person, physically, mentally. So what did you wish you'd have known when you were younger what are some of the key takeaways that you wish you'd have maybe had in your back pocket that maybe some other people in their 40s, 50s, 60s listening to this haven't actually got yet? What are some of those keys that you would have said to your younger self?
This applies no matter how old you are. And the first thing that came into my head when you said that is like, it's possible. You can do it. Because whether you're 21, 33, 45, 50, however old, like if you're in a position where like, oh, I'm really not happy with my health, but you know, I'm too old, I can't do anything about it. Like you can do something about it. Like we work with a lot of men, helping them optimize health, hormone profiles, all this sort of stuff. And the biggest issue I would say that people don't understand is, and it's the same thing for business, is if you're working really hard at improving your health and fitness, or you're working really hard at improving your business, and you're either not making more money or you're not improving your health and fitness, you're not working on the right thing. Now, if you're looking at your health, for example, and you're in that position, you need to identify what's the problem. Now, one of the easiest ways to do this, if there is an actual issue, is going to be like medically, is get a full blood panel done. So if you're in the UK, when I lived there, I used to use a company called Medichecks a lot. They come to your house, take blood tests, do everything. It's like 200 quid, best money you can ever spend. You should do that everyone should do that every 6 months, just from a health point of view, in my opinion, because you can spot areas to improve and areas to where there could be problems. Now, you don't know how to fix something unless you know what the problem is, right? Like you can have massive vitamin deficiencies, massive mineral deficiencies, and they accumulate over time. When you start to fix those things, you start to feel great. And what also happens when you start to feel great, your body will start to change. Because the way I try and explain to people, particularly if they're looking to lose fat and get in better shape, if you're trying to do that right now and your body's super inflamed, you're vitamin mineral deficient, it's like trying to drive the car with a handbrake on. It's like, you can do it, but it's going to be difficult and the car's not going to like it. And that's basically what you're doing with your body. If your body's super inflamed, there's a lot that can be done to fix that. And it's not as complicated as you think. And results suddenly come easily. And that's where, if I knew, there's one thing I wish I knew when I was younger would be, other than believing in yourself, would you just be like, what's the one thing that's really going to make the big difference? Fix that one thing for 60, 90 days and then find the next one thing. And that process of finding the one thing, if you're not sure how to do that, get a coach to help you do that, because that's what their job is. And if someone's done it over and over and over again, it's very easy to see. Even in terms of like, I was reading, I think it was Atomic Habits book I was actually reading. There's an example of a lady, she went to go visit her stepdad, and her stepdad was like white in the face, and she was like, you need to go to hospital right now. And her dad was actually about to have a heart attack. And she just knew, because she could recognize, because she's seen it so many times, the pattern that her dad's face wasn't right. And that's the same thing with coaches. It's like they see the same thing over and over again. It's like, okay, this is the problem here. And I see it all the time with businesses and guys getting in shape. It's like, I can 95% sure this person, without even doing blood work, this is the issue, because it's the same telltale signs you see over and over again. Because whilst everyone is different, biologically and genetically, we're pretty much the same. It's just our epigenetics in terms of the environment and lifestyles that change, if that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. Why waste? It's what I see over and over again in most women, the kind of women listening to this, is they're spending 90% of their time and energy on 100 things that don't work. And maybe one does work, but it takes up only 1% of their time. They don't know what one it is, and we give up and give in. So identify the one thing that's going to make the biggest impact, and the rest can wait. So at the end of the day, everything that I've taken from what you've said sort of concurs, I think, with what I would usually say to people is it's about results, not complicated stuff. And I think in this day and age, people, you said about instant gratification. We have Amazon. It's not going to come tomorrow. It's not going to come today. I don't know what it's like in Dubai, but here in the London tube system, if the tube is delayed by 2 minutes, there's uproar, there's anger. We need it now. And I think it's the same when it comes to people's bodies. People want stuff. I want the latest Apple Watch. I want the latest tracker. I want the latest supplements. I want the latest trainers. I can't start being healthy until I have all of these things that make me feel like I'm doing a good job. And I see it a lot in sort of unqualified trainers, is here's really, really complicated supersets and various different things that have no meaning whatsoever for this person, but they feel like they're getting bang for their buck because they've been given stuff. And it's about results at the end of the day. And if you can do one thing and get the same results as doing 200, why not just spend that time on a beach in Dubai or with your family, right?
And to be honest, actually, we haven't spoken about this, but the easiest thing for people to fix that makes the biggest difference for everything is actually your sleep. So if I was to give some very brief synopsis of the quickest thing to fix your sleep, if you snore and mouth breathe, like this literally changed my life, in particular as a bigger guy, use nasal strips when you sleep. I'm also incredibly sensitive to light when I sleep. It wakes me up. So I use a face mask. It's called Manta face mask. And then if you want to go down the route of using supplementation to improve deep sleep, I'd recommend using the Sleep Stack by Supplement Needs. And then one thing that's I'm a big believer in is like what gets tracked gets managed. I haven't actually got it on, but I use like an Aura ring that tracks my sleep quality and things. There you go. There you go. Because like we said earlier about the blood testing, you don't know you have an issue if you're not tracking stuff, right? So it's like everyone in the world sleeps, otherwise you'd be dead. So like you might believe, yeah, I sleep. I'm like, okay, that's cool. So does everyone. But the reality is there's difference between getting good quality sleep and then like your mouth breathing, your body's not actually going to a state of rest. And if you wake in the morning and you're tired all the time, that's for a reason. Your sleep's not optimized. The more you can optimize your sleep, the quicker you burn body fat when you're sleeping. You build muscle when you're sleeping. There's also a process in the brain when you sleep where basically like fluid comes through and like clears your brain essentially. I can't remember the process called. But basically, when towards the end of the day, when you feel like you can't think correctly, that's basically why. So when you sleep, that gets cleared through. Sleep is the most important thing to fix, and it's completely free. So try not to watch horror films before going to sleep. Try not to be staring at screens all the time. You can go super anal to some things of like wearing blue light blocking glasses. I have some, I don't really use them, but like go within reason. If things stress you out, don't do them. If you don't mind wearing an Aura ring, and then do that.
I love that. Absolutely great piece of advice to finish up on. Sleep is the fundamental. And that brings us back to the whole theme of what you said about discipline and choosing what you want most. You know, most people don't get good quality sleep because they're up late till 11:30 p.m. scrolling on their phones, distracting themselves with screens. And I always say, well, if it means that much to you, it needs to happen before 9 p.m. You know, there needs to be a cutoff when we prioritize. I mean, you know, when I was 18, I probably wouldn't be saying that, but nothing good comes from after 9 p.m. people.
100%. 100%. And the last thing I say of this from a fat loss point of view, I call this the danger zone, right? So no one wakes up at 7 a.m. and starts eating chocolate bars. Well, I'd like to think not. But 6 to 9 p.m. in the evening when you're tired and you're bored, you start going snacking, looking for crap. And that's where, like, if you can even just control that window, chances are the rest of your journey for getting in shape will be a lot easier.
Love it. The danger zone. And yeah, if you are waking up at 7 a.m. and eating a chocolate bar, please get in touch with one of us because we really like that. Well, look, Charlie, it has been absolutely fantastic talking to you, and I really appreciate you taking your time and sharing some wisdom and some personal, you know, anecdotes and stories with us. And a massive thank you as well to everyone for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here as always. And if you want to get in touch with either myself or Charlie, all of our details will be in the podcast description. So feel free to check it out. Follow Charlie on Instagram. I mean, for lack of anything else, there's some really nice pictures of abs on there. So it's great entertainment. But yeah, Charlie, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.